as I came out and found myself and my identities, I think that made it a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult for me to even think about being a parent.
One theme that, it won't surprise you, has been running through almost every episode of our show has been family. The desire to have a family. The choices we all must make to achieve that goal, and the various pathways that exist to get us there. For some, things come easily. For others, not so much. For a lot of people, any plan to have a child includes something, well, complicated. For couples in the LGBTQIA+ community and single parents by choice, that's always the case. Adoption is an option, but can be very difficult, and there are plenty of assisted reproductive technology options out there to help. But these can also come with their own challenges. Well, that's something that today's guest understood at an early age. And when the time came and she met her partner, she was well aware that things might be a bit tricky on that front. In fact, she was under the impression that her preferred path to parenthood might be prohibitively expensive, and therefore, maybe not a real option. Fortunately, she was pleasantly surprised. I'm Dan Bulger with Progyny, and this is Infertility. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As always, if you're listening on the podcast, please leave a rating and review. You have no idea how helpful they are. And if you're watching on YouTube, please take a second to subscribe and like this video. Before we start, I have a fairly exciting announcement. Each year, Resolve, the National Infertility Association, honors an employer or organization with the Hope Award for Access. This is an award that is given to an organization that is really moving the needle in expanding access to fertility and family-building care. And this year's award recipient is going to be a company you might have heard of. It's Amazon. They were selected in recognition of their life-changing family benefits and for providing truly equitable support for their diverse workforce. We at Progyny are so incredibly proud and excited for Amazon to be receiving this award and for supporting Amazonians in their family-building journeys. Amazonians are what Amazon employees are called. Amazon will be receiving this award during Resolve's annual gala called the Night of Hope on November 6th. For those in the community that are attending, we can't wait to see you there. Now, today's story is tied to that announcement. Isn't that nice? Today's guest, Stephanie, is one of the tens of thousands who have utilized Amazon's benefit through Progyny to reach their dreams of family. So, let's get to know Stephanie.
I'm the middle of 5 kids. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, but didn't really know what that looked like, especially as I kind of came out and found myself and my identities. I think that made it a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult for me to even think about being a parent and what that would look like, how we would do it. But ultimately, always knew I wanted to be a mom. That was always something I wanted to do. Met my wife. She is the most personable person I've ever met. So loves children, loves people. And so that was something we talked about pretty early on when we met too. Like we wanted to be parents, wanted to be moms. That was important, but we were pretty open to how that happened. So we definitely had conversations of, would we want to start with IUI? Would IVF ever be in our possibilities of things we could, afford to do or be able to do? We talked about adoption. So there were a lot of conversations.
Yeah, so Stephanie and Jasmine, that's Stephanie's wife's name, were married. And for them, if they decided to try to have a biologically related child, they would need donor sperm and IUI at minimum. If all goes well, IUI is a great option. No need for IVF at all, and it's not that expensive. But with IUI, the process would be that together they would find a donor for sperm, acquire that sperm, and then that sperm would be injected into whichever one of them wanted to carry. Again, it's a great option, but there is another option, one that the couple heard about. They just weren't sure they could afford it.
Our dream was always to do reciprocal IVF. My wife does not have a desire to carry and does not want to carry. And not that I really ever really wanted to as well, but I was definitely open to it. And so we wanted to both somehow figure out if we could both be a part of that process.
Reciprocal IVF is a really wonderful option. In short, it's IVF, where eggs are retrieved from the ovaries, joined with sperm in a lab, embryos develop, and an embryo is transferred in the hopes of achieving a pregnancy. But for same-sex female partners, this can be done a little differently. Instead of the eggs being retrieved from one person and an embryo placed back into that same person, the eggs are retrieved from one partner, and then the embryo is transferred into the other partner. That way, one partner is providing the egg and has that genetic link, while the other partner carries the pregnancy and has that link. It's a really great option that many people want to utilize, but sometimes can't. It's IVF, after all, and that means it can cost a lot of money.
When my wife and I first started talking about kids, the initial conversation was we would love to do reciprocal IVF. Like that would be phenomenal. Then when we started researching into the cost of reciprocal IVF, like you're looking at upwards $25,000, $30,000 to do that. I mean, it's a huge financial burden. And so that was a conversation we had. Like, realistically, is this something we can afford to do? You know, what is our main priority in creating a family? Is it doing reciprocal IVF, or is it, being able to carry? Is it having a child? Is it adopting? We went through a lot of different phases of talking about what made the most sense for us. And what at that time, financially made sense. So that was not really something that we thought we were going to be able to do. Until we then found out that we were covered through Progyny, through Progyny's benefits, which are phenomenal. And again, like I said, not something that we thought we were going to be able to do, but definitely the best case of what we wanted to do to create our family.
But Stephanie and Jasmine were in for some good news. As I mentioned at the top, Stephanie works at Amazon, and Amazon offers incredible, award-winning fertility coverage for their employees. Fertility coverage through Progyny.
I think as soon as I joined Amazon, it was probably about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago when I joined. As I was scrolling through the benefits options and looking at fertility options, I'll be honest, at that point in time, I didn't know if they were inclusive fertility options. I know a lot of times, especially with fertility, especially even a couple of years ago, but you would have to somehow prove or show confirmation that you had been trying for at least a year or whatever the case is. And so there were a lot of questions that I had in regards to, would we even apply? Like, would we even be able to receive these benefits? So I started digging a little bit deeper, started connecting with our PCA from Progyny, who we connected with immediately, and just asked a couple of questions about, like, would we even be able to do this, right? As a 2-mom family, and what that could look like in regards to showing fertility or infertility. So was very happily surprised. Got a lot of really great connections with our PCA, and she was super, super helpful in regards to just showing us exactly what the Smart Cycle is, how we could go about it, what our potential options are for the both of us.
Stephanie mentioned her PCA. For those who haven't used Progyny, a PCA is a patient care advocate. On the surface, these are the people you call to activate your benefit or to discuss coverage and things like that. But in practice, there's so much more. Think about calling into an insurance company for something. Just close your eyes and imagine it for a few seconds. I bet you're still on hold. With PCAs, I like to say that they are very fast to answer the phone and then very slow to get off of it. PCAs are there for logistical support, yes, but they are also there for emotional support, general support. There's a lot of times while going through treatment when people have questions and can't quite get them answered at the doctor's office. Well, PCAs can help with that. I could go on and on about Progyny PCAs. I know that they're a really remarkable part of the Progyny benefit, but it'll probably mean more coming from Stephanie.
Her name is Najamia, phenomenal person. Like I said, she really helped us walk us through everything, especially because I think we had a lot of questions that maybe like our clinic wasn't able to answer or wasn't as available, but I always knew I could reach out to her and she would respond. Even before we knew what we were going to do, she gave us options and ultimately kind of talked us through anything. She was super available, willing to talk on the phone, willing to talk through the messaging system. Like, she really was what led us to, like I said, find our clinic initially, but then through our entire process of what opportunities we could have at that point. So, yeah.
All right, so the benefits they had on offer were inclusive, and they really enjoyed the support they got from their PCA. They were off to a great start. The plan was reciprocal IVF, which can come with a learning curve.
I didn't have a ton of knowledge, right? Like, I think I'd heard, I started researching, honestly, just like social media platforms to look for people that, hashtag IVF or IUI, really infertility, and just tried to find people that I could connect with through social media initially, so that way I could have someone to talk to. Because at that point in time, like I didn't know anybody that had ever done IVF. Now where I'm at, I know many, many people through sharing my story and getting connected that way with a lot of other people. But yeah, it was hard because we didn't really have much of an idea as to what would be expected. We just kind of researched on our own and then started going to our clinic and learned more information there. So I didn't have a ton of information.
So, as we said, reciprocal IVF is, well, it's IVF. So it starts with injectable medications that you administer at home.
Jasmine is a physician assistant. So she does orthopedic surgery. So like full hip and knee replacements. So like she is a medical professional. Any type of like medical things I trust her to fully do. So she actually did her own stimming. She let me do one of them, and I do have it on video. But she let me do one of her stim meds. Like I said before, doing your own shots, whether it's stimming or the PIO shots, is wild to me. And I know a lot of women who do it, which is, phenomenal, but it was definitely not something that I knew I could do because I just kept psyching myself out. Like I tried it one time and I just couldn't do it. But she did all of her own, with the exception of one that she let me do. But it was more intensive than we thought. We didn't realize at the time that while they were measuring her, the stimulation of her actual eggs and the size of them, that she would have to go into the clinic like every single day. For almost a week and a half straight. So that wasn't something that we were really tracking to or understood that was going to be a part of the process until, she went, and then they're like, okay, yep, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. And then she's like, I have to keep going in, balancing that with her own work, and going in early before she had to work, I think was challenging. But ultimately, like the actual process of stimming was pretty easy, as I said, because Progyny RX just sent it straight to our door. So we didn't have to go anywhere to navigate getting it and then also administering it. So
after about 2 weeks of stimming to grow the follicles in the ovary, it's time for the egg retrieval, and then it's in the hands of the lab. They join the eggs with sperm to create embryos, and then from there, focus shifted to Stephanie.
Once they were the right size, we were able to retrieve them, and then from that point in time, we were able to send all of that out to get tested and then start my process. So for my process, we started actually on birth control for a month, which was something, again, I wasn't expecting to have to do, but I was like, okay, I guess this is part of the process. So we did that for a month. And then we were able to then start our actual transfer. So before the transfer, about a week before, we started numerous medications, oral medications, and then also shot medications and stimulations. And then transfer day, of course, we got to do our trigger shot the night before. Super excited. Going into our transfer, was able to watch our embryo, physically being transferred, and so being implanted, which was very cool as well. And then that entire time frame, about a week before, up until technically 12 and a half weeks, 13 weeks, was every night I would have to get a progesterone and oil shot. So our bodies just don't naturally produce the progesterone it needs to keep the eggs implanted. And so we got to enjoy that. My wife is a medical professional. So I will say from that standpoint, I felt very, very comforted and supported in the fact that I knew that she knew what she was doing. But otherwise, if she wasn't, I don't know how comfortable I would be. And I know some women do their own IVF shots and stim shots and progesterone and oil shots, and I do not know how they do that. It's phenomenal because I was every single time I flinched. I was like, oh, it's coming. I know it's coming. But yeah, it was definitely a very long process. Like I said, I did not know that I would have to continue my shots till 12 plus weeks out while I was already pregnant too. So
progesterone and oil, the infamous injection. There are a lot of shots that are associated with IVF, but the one that most people actually find a bit daunting is progesterone in oil. It's a bigger needle. It's injected intramuscularly, so into the muscle rather than under the skin. And it's in oil, so the fluid is a bit thicker. All of this causes discomfort. If you're finding yourself days away from starting progesterone in oil, then now is probably a good time for you to check out our progesterone in oil injection demonstration videos. It's on YouTube, and we'll include a link in the show notes. Okay, so Stephanie was prepped, an embryo was transferred, and down the line, they met their beautiful baby boy.
So my son is Nakoa. He has two middle names. So one from Jasmine's side of the family, which is Lee, and then one from my side of the family, which is both my dad and uncles and brothers and other cousins' middle names, Pualani, which is Hawaiian, and then our last name, Kalili. So he is my favorite little human being. He looks so much like my wife. We call him her twin because he definitely looks a lot like her, which I love to see in him every time I look at him.
With the help of Amazon and Progyny, Stephanie and Jasmine had a relatively smooth journey.
Amazon has been super instrumental in my career progression, but also to have this benefit to be able to create a family. There are, I think I said this, but no words. Honestly, it's so hard to say thank you 1,000 times and still not feel like that's enough. My wife and I knew we wanted to start a family, especially being part of the queer community. I think that was always a question, like how we were going to make this happen, how we were going to do that. And again, through Amazon's benefits with Progyny, like we were able to actually do it the way we wanted to. Reciprocal IVF was something that we knew we always wanted, but also knew that likely wasn't super attainable with the financial burden and the other challenges that come with it. So super appreciative, super thankful to Amazon.
It's no great surprise that Amazon was able to win the Hope Award for Access. Amazon is an employer that really goes above and beyond for their people. And each year, more and more employers are starting to offer coverage like this. This is something that will only accelerate the more we all talk about it.
For me, I think it's important that we normalize fertility and talking about fertility, and especially when it comes to inclusive fertility. Like I said before, not necessarily something people really talk about, and not necessarily a benefit that a lot of people have. So it was definitely something that I wanted to talk about and share. Like I said, I journaled my entire process from the very beginning to after I had my son. And so for me, that was really important. And, posting my story throughout those stages was also very important. So that way I knew if people needed to talk to someone, if they were going through a similar process. When I started, I didn't know anybody that was going through IVF. Didn't know anybody who ever had gone through IVF. So really started utilizing social media as a platform to connect with other people who had gone through similar process.
The more we talk about it, the more we share our stories and amplify the voices of those who share their own, the more support and access we'll all gain to these life-changing, family-building options. I want to thank Stephanie for being on the show with us today. I also want to give a big thank you to Amazon for everything they're doing for their people, and I look forward to seeing them receive their award at the Night of Hope. And of course, I want to thank you for joining us too. If you want to connect with us, you can do so on Instagram at This Is a Fertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progyny, you can do so at Progyny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, you gotta smash the like button. This Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember, this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bulger, and this is Infertility.